Okay. Hi, Rachel. It's nice to see you today. Thank you so much for
Hello.
joining us for our Center on Disability and Community Inclusion podcast. I am Pam Cummings, and I'm the physical therapy consultant and project coordinator of the I-Team Early Intervention Project. We are a project at CDCI. Our role, we're interdisciplinary. There is me and an occupational therapy consultant and a communication consultant and a family support person. We support early intervention teams who are working with children who have the most complex needs. We do that through consultation and also through trainings across the state of Vermont. Rachel, I would love to have you introduce yourself and tell us how you came to find yourself on both sides of the bed.
I feel like I need to use lots of letters. You're like C, D, C, I, E, but I don't have any letters. I don't have as many letters as you. I could maybe make some up.
Yeah.
I have a BSc in nursing. There you go. I've got one. I went to KCL, which is King's College London, and did my nursing degree. So yes, I'm Rachel. I am a qualified nurse and very cliche. I met my current husband, like I'm going to get another one. I don't intend to get another one. My one and only, hopefully, husband. I've known since I was a kid, and we got together when we were teenagers. And just to finish off the cliche, he's a doctor. Of course. So Tim and I got together when we were in our late teens, and I did apply for medical school, but I wasn't clever enough.
Oh,
I know.
Not
it's true. Well, no, okay, I might not have been. I'd have to have retaken my A-levels several times to get the grades that I required. So I didn't get into medical school. I resisted being a nurse, but I was a sciencey girl. So I went off and did nursing. I did a degree in nursing at King's College London, and I kind of envisaged Tim and I going off and saving the world, one person at a time. Like, who wouldn't? I'm a good Christian girl, brought up in a Christian household, and I just figured I would be another missionary across some other plane. So take down the cliche. I mean, I imagine myself as Florence Nightingale, but also a little bit Lara Croft. I kind of like utility belt, so
Something
lady with the lamp, but also got some attitude. That's what I was going for. Yeah, completely.
That worked well, actually.
I think I'm a perfect hybrid, really. So Tim, we actually got married before Tim finished medical school, and then we did a bit of traveling. I went to Uganda and did some work there, and did some clinics in the outskirts and places in Rwanda, and then we did some work in New Zealand, and then we might have had a little bit of a jolly on the way home and gone to Australia and Thailand and various places. And that was great. And then we got back and we decided to be grown-ups. So we got back and bought a house, got a mortgage. We didn't really buy a house, let's be honest. The bank owns the house for a very long time. And we decided to start a family. So got pregnant, and it wasn't until my eldest son was born 16 years ago now that suddenly, having spent being on one side of the bed, I'd worked in A&E, I'd worked in elderly care, I'd worked in ITU, and when I was doing traveling I worked in ICU, and I worked in theatres and all sorts of places, that I went from one side of the bed where I was breaking the news and telling people what was happening and seeing people's lives change dramatically in what we call A&E and you guys ER, that suddenly people were breaking news to me because despite having a normal pregnancy, I mean, is any pregnancy normal?
Having your pregnancy, which is how it always is.
A normal pregnancy, is it normal to wake up and go out and then vomit in a curb?
Oh.
on the way to the supermarket. I mean, it was normal in that sense. It was normal in that there weren't any problems, but I don't know, I still think your body growing at the rate of grass is weird. And, you know, like, yeah, it was all just very strange. But
I had random nosebleeds with one of my pregnancies.
how did you? Lovely.
And I was doing direct care. And so it'd be like, yeah, I'll be back in, 10 to 15.
Sorry if I've just bled on your carpet.
Mind the blood. Yeah. Good. Can I use your bathroom for maybe 15 minutes? Then I'll be back and then I'll go home. Then I'll leave. But anyway.
Lovely.
Yes. Normal.
No, yeah. I didn't, no nosebleeds, but lots of puking. I couldn't do the bread aisle.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there was something about bread. I couldn't cope with the smell of bread. So I'd like walk into a shop and then I'd just be like, oh,
no,
can't do it. I'm coming back. Oh, anyway, I don't miss being pregnant. But it was all quite normal. Then the boy turned up having the night before I couldn't feel him move. And I woke up in the middle of the night stressed that I couldn't feel my baby move, but I'd felt him move the day before. And Tim and I decided to go to the hospital the next morning if we still couldn't feel him move, because Tim had reminded me of times that I'd complained him kicking, the baby was kicking my bump and stuff. Tim toodled off to work on the morning of my due date. And I called up the midwives and said, so I can't feel my baby move. And they're like, well, it's probably all fine, but why don't you come in and we'll get you checked out. But have some breakfast first. Like, nothing to worry about. They're there. I turned up and they strapped a monitor on me and I heard a heartbeat. So, first big deep breath. Tim rushed up from the ward and heard the heartbeat and second big deep breath. But the baby still wasn't moving. I was given this little red button, a little bit sort of Austin Powers, like if I press this, it's going to eject me from my hospital bed. But I never had reason to press this red button because the red button was your baby is moving and you can feel a kick. But I didn't ever feel the baby move. And I had an ultrasound scan, and they said all the blood sort of, looks like it's all moving around absolutely fine. We can't see what the problem is. But given we still can't see your baby move, let's get that baby out. So we went across to labour ward. So it'd be too long being a first-time mother to try an induction. So sunroof it was. And we had a cesarean.
Sunroof? Is that what you call it?
That's, well, there's two ways for a baby to come out, and this was the sunroof. So he...
Sorry, is the other the trunk? What is the other?
I haven't gone that far to decide what the other version, like the exhaust, maybe. I mean, that's not... Okay. Not sure. Maybe that analogy stays with the sunroof.
The sunroof. Okay.
just the sunroof. Yeah. Anyway, okay. I guess it's a door. It's just the other way is the door. Just door? The way it's supposed to be coming in and out.
Yeah. Okay. The door, that works. Because you wouldn't be in the trunk. Okay. Go on.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah, we could get very tied up in that. So anyway, cesarean section was the way forward. And the doctor was like, I'm 90% sure your baby's going to be absolutely fine, but we need to get on with this. And we're like, okay, yep, no problem. Into a clinical gown. And then they tell you to like bend over. Like you're 9 months pregnant and you have to like crunch so that your spine sticks out for the spinal block. Like what is that even? It's like I've not been able to see my toes for 4 months and you want me to stick my spine out. And then you see the size of the needle and you're like, oh, okay, I'm doing it. There you go.
Totally do it.
Is it all right? Can you see? Please tell me you can see my spine. Because those needles are massive.
Yes.
Absolutely huge. Anyway, Legs fizzing and tingling, land on the bed. The thing gets erected between me and the lower part of my body. Tim stays head end. Being a doctor and having done some time in surgery and stuff, he is absolutely fine cutting people open, but not his wife, it seems. Suddenly it was less it was less okay.
Yeah.
And so he stayed up by my head, and the baby was born, and they said it's a boy, and we're like, yay. And then the baby was taken off, and I couldn't hear him cry. And that was genuinely the first time, I think that really was the first time I thought stuff was going wrong before that, but in a kind of other person way. Does that make sense? Like, it was, I'm great at imagining bad things happening. I'm really good at that. I have that down to a T. I can imagine all the potential negative things that could occur. And it was only when I didn't hear the crying that that reality landed in me and in the situation. And Tim went backwards and forwards and told me that, the theatre was suddenly way more quiet. Everyone was very busy, but there were the chatter and the hum and the kind of busyness was suddenly, I felt the change in tension very significantly. And Tim said, he's not breathing. He's being resuscitated. And then it all changes. I got to see the top of his head before he was whisked off to neonatal intensive care. And Tim got out of his blues and went to try and see him. And I'm obviously being sewn up by a poor doctor who's actually beside herself, because it was her first kind of not great outcome. And I remember sitting in recovery and dozing off and being, how on earth, like waking up with that start, how can I go to sleep? Mm-hmm. How can I be in this situation that I don't know if my son is alive or not, and I'm managing to doze off? But I was obviously up to my eyeballs with medication. Mm-hmm. And actually, in the preceding 16 years, it is very useful to be able to sleep anywhere and everywhere, because there have been numerous hospital beds and floors and all sorts of places that I have been required to sleep whilst he's needing to be looked after. So he got whisked off. We do have a faith, and so a minister turned up and there was lots of praying and text went out. It was pre-Facebook, the good old days when you had to text people. And then we were given, sort of the next day or two, we were given the chance that he wouldn't survive, the chance that he would be absolutely fine, and then this big grey bit in the middle. And we very firmly landed in the grey bit. We didn't know that, though, until for another 10 weeks. So he was in hospital for about 12 days, amazingly came out without not on any medication, not no assisted feeding. He was being breastfed. When I had my second child, I realized it was a bit rubbish at breastfeeding, but I didn't realize that because I'd never breastfed anybody before that time.
Yeah, you were doing it.
And it seemed to be working. I'd used a pump. That's a whole other thing. Talk about like being Daisy the cow, like in hospital while your baby's in skaboo. Yes, and you attach this pump to your, oh my days.
Yes.
Weird.
That's wonderful. Pumping, not wonderful. Yeah. But was he breastfeeding directly, or he was drinking breast milk?
So when he was first born, he had an NG and they gave him fluids, and then he had my expressed milk. He only ever had expressed milk when he was in hospital, and he was breastfeeding by the time he left.
Wow. I mean, that's really good sign, right? He's
Yeah,
managing the suck, swallow, breathe,
absolutely.
come out. Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
pretty.
we left with this optimism that we were taking our miracle baby home.
You did it. Yes.
Yay! And we came home with our arms full of gifts and balloons and baby, and thrust into this whole 24-hour thing. Suddenly there's 2 o'clock twice a day, not just once a day. Suddenly there's 3 o'clock, not just in the afternoon. And then there is things coming out of all sorts of orifices. There's sunroofs and boots and doors and exhaust, like all
very forcefully. Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
And when you're trying to like not turn the light on too bright so the baby doesn't completely wake up, and then you're like, nah, I'm gonna have to turn the light on because I have no idea whatever that was, where it landed, what I need to clean up. Yeah. So that was the normal carnage that happens after a newborn baby. And it wasn't until we were going for an MRI scan. He had an MRI scan booked for 10 weeks. His 6-week check, which is routine, was all right. They were like kind of like the pediatric consultant was like kind of crossed his fingers, said maybe he's been lucky because he looked like he was tracking and they looked like he might be smiling. And the MRI, I mean, I don't want to be spoiler alert, but the fact that we're here talking about this means the MRI didn't quite work out as we'd hoped. And we left that appointment clinging to each other, having all of the things that I don't think we even realized we'd anticipated. It isn't until something is in jeopardy or something is no longer something that can be assumed that you realize that was an expectation in your life, an expectation that was going to happen. So first steps, first words, first school, like all this stuff suddenly kind of wafted into somewhere else. Because we were no longer able to assume, because they said he had severe and complex brain damage. They kind of used words like all parts of his brain and the grey matter and the white matter and severe and all that kind of stuff. And in the middle of that appointment, I remember just thinking, how did I let this happen? Like, how did I carry on doing all the things in my day when this
happening
and this major moment that was going to take us so off script on what we had predicted. Up until that point we were on point for the narrative. And then so suddenly the narrative.
When you were going into the MRI appointment or the results appointment, were you like, it's fine, this is going to validate that it's fine? Or did you have a gut that maybe it's not going to be quite fine? Or just where was your head at?
So the gut moment, the kind of stone in your stomach that says, happened about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks before the appointment, when it'd been after the 6-week scan and I'd noticed a crease on Sam's head, the bony and the seam in his head, and I got the measuring tape out and measured it and realised the nurse at his 6-week check had inaccurately measured his head circumference. So they had put his head circumference down as being on track, and when I measured it, it was not on track. He was born with a normal head circumference, and then by 6 weeks, well, now this was 8 weeks, it had tailed off and it was like down to 20, then 0 kind of type centile. So that was so Tim and I had, and Tim's a GP, so he was like, I don't think this is very good, but maybe it's okay. Kind of clinging. And
And he seems okay. He's doing all the things we would expect him to do.
Yeah, I mean, again, with hindsight, he was floppy. He didn't hold the way my other babies did. But that early, that it wasn't ever going to be something that we're really sure of. So by 10 weeks we went in for the MRI, and we were both worried, and we kind of said to the consultant, the registrar that came and spoke to us to kind of clerk us in for the MRI, because he was going to have a sedative for the MRI. We were like, and they were like, has everything been fine? We're like, yeah, he's feeding, he's putting on weight, The only thing is maybe his head circumference, and in the hope that she'd be like, oh, that's okay, don't worry about that. And actually, she just did not do that at all. She went, oh, exactly that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks for that information. I'll just scribble that down and put a big underline on it. Exactly. I'll just get my highlighter out and put a big asterisk next to that thing. It's like, oh. Yeah, so that was, and I remember so clearly sitting on the plastic red chairs outside the MRI scan, feeling like these people were inside the scanning room. It's like sitting, I mean, I've never been, but I imagine it's like someone reading your tarot cards, or somebody like getting this crystal ball out, because they were in there with getting information that was going to tell me what my future was. That's it. And I just felt I should have a more comfortable chair. If this is going to be one of the most significant moments in my life, I ought to have a better chair, and there shouldn't be people trying to take out my toes with wheelchairs and trolleys zooming past. Like, give me
some space, more comfortable chair, and maybe strap me down a little bit. I might need to be strapped down.
I just feel like this moment should be more. But that's not when we're told that
that's when you're waiting.
Radiographer was, she came out and she was like, so the doctor will bring you through and give you the results in a while. Go back up to the ward, feed your baby, And I just shot him a glance and I said, that's not good. If she had any, because I know that if I was talking to somebody and I was able to give them, this is going to be okay, I would have given them it's all right. The doctor will be seeing you, but it all looks good. You know, you're good. Exactly. But there was no you're good indication. So I think I knew at that. And Tim was like, let's just wait. And one of the things he had said to me, I don't exactly know when, but he was like, the baby we're taking into this appointment is the same baby as we're taking out.
I was going to ask you that. Did he seem different before and after? Because I know that is something other families deal with. Like even when they get diagnoses at older ages, they've had this child for 3 years and now they get a name for what it is. And it's the same baby. It's the same kid, right? But your perception is different now, right?
Definitely it's me that changes. Definitely it's me that changes. Whether... And I guess it's not surprising. It's like that sort of scales before your eye. That is that everything in the world looks different. And I write about it in my book, The Skies of Munda. I write about the difference between that journey there. So Tim and I both trained in London, and the appointment was in London. We'd got the train. And so there was lots of familiarity about the stations and the stops and whatever else. But that journey home, everything looked different. It was so similar. Do you know what I mean? There was something so normal and comforting about it being familiar because we knew it and we'd been there, but suddenly it all looked different. You looked at steps differently. You looked at people's expectations differently. You looked at he just looked at everything differently, and that we actually left the hospital, and my closest friend at the time was having a baby that day. And so we actually went and visited her. She'd had a cesarean that day. So we actually turned up to the hospital, and they obviously knew that we had gone for this appointment. And so we were at the hospital saying, yeah, it's not good news, whilst being introduced to her.
Baby.
Yeah. So that was a paradox and a half. And that was a few days before. That was a few days before Christmas. That was the 20th of December. So that changed that Christmas dramatically. But I guess the thing that happened there was we went off script. We went in a completely different direction. And the first thing that I did, I think, at that point was I realized it was too hard to be disappointed by what didn't then happen. And I had to come from a place of not expecting anything to happen.
Oh, interesting.
But so Tim's granddad used to say, expect the worst and plan for the best, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Kind of, do you mean hope for the best? Yeah.
Plan for the worst.
Let's make sure that we're leaving room for good things to happen. Yes. But let's be honest,
we've got our bag packed. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah. But everything could possibly go wrong.
Yeah, and I think to protect my own heart from the perpetual disappointment, I kind of had to strip back to, this is where we are and how do we move from here. I don't know that I did that very well, but that's what I was aiming for. Because I couldn't be like, oh, he's, I'm hoping that he's going to be able to step or walk or do this. Oh, no, he's not. Oh, I'm hoping that he can see and did it. Oh, he's not. Oh, I'm hoping that he can. But actually, that is definitely what it felt like those first couple of years. I talk again in the book. I talk about this, just feeling like you're in the ring, and that every time you get yourself up within those first 3 or 4 years of diagnoses, it's not just one thing.
Back down.
It's always the next thing, and another sucker punch, and another thing that gets you on the canvas, and there is a repeated. You fall down a rabbit warren of disability diagnosis like this. It's just feels endless. Those first
more piled on.
Another person that you need to meet, another appointment that you need to do, another therapy you need to consider, another problem that could be on the horizon.
And now there's 10 people in the room. Now there's 15 people, right? I do get that. We've heard that from families. Sometimes the next diagnosis is just like another diagnosis. It's just too much. Like we've got this, we can't have that too, even if it's associated or whatever. In my mind, it all goes together, but no, one more thing. It just, I do see that as
you cannot add another thing to my list, my son's list of stuff at the top of the letters. Yeah. Can we peak at 4? And then can you like appendix it? I just don't need any more added to that list. But it feels, and everybody gives you those diagnoses because they think they're helpful, because they're trying to give you information, and information is power, and it's how we help and support people. But it is emotionally exhausting recalibrating yourself to this next thing. I remember saying to Tim, I just wish they'd tell me everything. Like, I just want to know all of it here and now. Just tell me, it'll be awful, and then I'll get up and we'll get on with it. But with hindsight, maybe that wasn't be such a great idea either. Maybe I wouldn't have got up if someone had. But I do remember some of those appointments where doctors told us the next thing, like at one point a doctor says, hopefully they'll stand, your son will stand, but he probably won't walk functionally. That was way over that he's so far from that being a thing. But at the time that felt like a loss. At the time that felt, that's something I had
I didn't
hoped.
know that yet.
Yeah. Well, I did want to know that. I was actually really annoyed that when I spoke to the physio, my local physio about it, she's like, yeah, I thought that. I'm like, why didn't you tell me?
Yes.
I was actually really cross that somebody who I thought I was close to professionally that I was working with, we were focused on helping my son, had information that I didn't have. I didn't like that. So I wanted to know, but it's just always tricky balancing the information. Anyway, I was at this appointment and I remember sitting in the waiting room and there being all these older children who were very obviously severely disabled and had really complex needs, and they were making noises and dribbling and had specialist chairs and neckerchiefs and suction things and all this stuff. And I just looked at this baby in front of me that was 6 months old, and yeah, he wouldn't look me in the eyes, and yeah, he wasn't picking things up and putting them in his mouth, but he was just my baby. And I genuinely could not see my life with him as a 13-year-old. I couldn't picture it. I couldn't. And maybe actually what I couldn't imagine was not so much him, because those children were in front of me and I'm a nurse and I know what those, what children with really complex needs looks like. What I couldn't imagine was myself. And I couldn't imagine my life within that story, within his life. And I think that was what I couldn't really articulate. And what the impact that had was I stopped being able to dream or imagine future.
At all.
Yeah.
Because
I couldn't think, when he's 5, then we'll be doing this or that. I just stopped being able to see, like I said, him and therefore me.
I met a family once and the child was young and not diagnosed yet, but they knew there was something. They hadn't gotten the diagnosis, and they really enjoyed the traditions of Halloween and Christmas. And one of the parents said, well, now those are ruined. Like the child has basically ruined these because the child's not going to be able to do the things we would have expected them to, and it was really interesting, the focus on that. But that was the visualization. What happens when you have a child, you imagine Christmas and what Christmas is like with this child, right? So it's really interesting.
And it does really boil down to, I think it boils down to what we think are the parts of life that we most treasure and enjoy. So I remember when my son had his barium swallow, and again, another corridor with another cheap rubbish seat with the trolley zooming past my feet. Right? Someone decides to tell me never to feed my son again. And I realized that the thing that I came down to weeks after that was the loss that I felt was much more about what I thought.
What's a typical meal look like in your house? What does dinner look like with your children?
What does a beach days look like? They're an ice cream. What does grandma coming to visit look like? A curly whirly. What does, as in a chocolate bar with toffee in the middle, what does Christmas look like? Christmas dinner. What does birthdays look like? Birthday cake. I'm not saying my whole world revolves around food, but it does. But it does. I taste and smell and savor the seasons and festivities and things through food. So the idea of him not experiencing that stuff, my heartbreak and loss over that was so much more tied up with my perception of what was important in life rather than what he actually enjoyed or savored or appreciated, because he actually found eating quite stressful, unsurprisingly, because it was going into his lungs. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't funnily enough.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he didn't see food coming because of the visual impairment. He would eat or whatever, but it didn't give him the same joy that a tub of ice cream gives me.
He didn't have the associations with it, right?
Exactly. So I guess that's the same for the parent that you're talking about. The things that are our markers in life. And I think, do you know what? I think this is one of the things that why parents like me get so obsessed with things like talking and walking.
All parents, but go on.
Because, well, but it's parents like me in that when you know your child's going to walk and talk, then that's just a thing, isn't it? There's no baggage along with that. But as soon as your child has complex needs or has a disability, then are they going to need a wheelchair? Like that it seems like a marker, doesn't it? It feels like a thing. Mm-hmm. Are they going to talk? Mm-hmm. And I guess we could say, well, that's understandable, because there are means of getting around and our means of communicating. But I feel like you're not saying to people, you know, is my son going to be able to get around? That's not the question, is it? Exactly. Is my son going to be able to express his or needs and his desires? That's not the question. It's something to do with words, and it's something to do with steps. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's to do with the baggage that we bring along, that is the magic of those first words, the magic of those first steps.
It's in every Hallmark commercial, right?
It is.
Yeah, I've never had a parent say, I want my child to be to have mobility and communication. They say
exactly
talking. That is what parents want. And then mobility and communication, the fact that it's possible. Mm-hmm. Can we give them ways to access those things? That becomes very exciting when it's understood that there are other ways to be able to be mobile and to communicate. But walking and talking still is the thing, right?
So I think the walking and talking thing, the transition from one side of the bed for me to the other was I guess there was another transition after that. So there was landing in the place of my son having a disability. And then there's landing in the place of, which I'm still working on. I'm not going to say I've got both feet on the ground on this one. Landing in the place where exactly what you said, it isn't necessarily about the walking and the talking. It's about breaking down even more what the essence of life and enjoyment is. And it isn't, oh, that was my phone. Or was that your phone?
Nope, that's you. Okay.
Sorry. Oh, if I knew where it was, then I would stop it from doing, but I can't see it. Oh, there it is. Here we go. Let's put it on silent. Breaking down the essence of life in a way that it isn't about the steps and the words. It's about the moving and the communicating. But I definitely think there is a process for us parents where we have to work through that
to get
emotionally there. Yeah, I don't think anyone can rush that. Mm-hmm. We'll all do it in different ways, in different things. There'll be certain things that are more meaningful or more difficult because of our own the parts of our life that are important to us, that we fear our sons and daughters are not suddenly able to do.
I think that the other part of it is joy, right? Like finding joy in life. And what I think brings me joy, and it might not even be what, you know, any of my children, right? Any of them think no. Right, who knows? That's
a parenting fail that we all do, isn't it?
We just assume that.
Yeah, exactly. You'll be really happy if you get really good grades and get this kind of job that I think is really good, even though they're like, no, I'll be really happy if you let me go on the Xbox for an extra 3 hours. Yeah, exactly. That's where my joy is. Are you Broadway. Sure?
I love Broadway. You don't want. Yeah. I'm going to bring you to Broadway all along your
childhood. You will love it.
You will love it. And then, funny, maybe not so much, right? But anyway, but joy. I mean, communication and mobility is very important, obviously, but joy, right? There's a lot of negative experiences that have to happen when you have medical diagnoses, and to make sure that there's pleasurable things that happen too, positive experiences, and honing in with your child on what that is, so that you can help be part of it, provide it, be part of it, whatever. Yeah.
And you keep coming back to ensuring that those other things are part and parcel of all of your world. I think that's something that both practitioners and parents can get lost into. Like I say, you fall down this rabbit warren of diagnoses and therapies and everything else, and it's so easy to get sucked into that world and miss the joy, miss the simple, powerful, authentic, meaningful aspects of life that are just drowned out with the noise of medical jargon, for once. Do you know what I mean? And schedules, essentially.
This is an aside, but have you seen the video Including Samuel? Do you know what that is? Oh, no. I'll send you a link.
Okay.
I'll show you. I'll share some information with you later about that. Okay, cool. I think you would really like it. It's about inclusion for this filmmaker. It's his son, and so he decides to make a documentary film about how to navigating how to have him be included in school. But what reminded me of it is his brother, the relationship between the brothers, and there's a lot of joy there. And the brother is the one who knows how to get the joy from, right? Two of them have such a great relationship. But I'll share it with you. He's a great Dan Habib. He's a great cool documentary filmmaker. He's done some cool things. Okay. You know, one thing that you said, which makes me I know that a lot of the work that you do is about bringing parents and providers together to work together better. And we're about to host a training with you doing just that. But when you talked about the physio who said, oh, I knew that, was holding information, or not even holding it, but didn't feel like it was maybe the right time to bring it up, or wasn't the person who could bring it up. But tell me more about that. Like, how could that have gone better for you?
I think it's really tricky, because I reckon that I could probably have a similar story where she told me that information and I was peed off with that. Exactly. I don't know that there is a fail-safe way of treading this minefield of complexity of emotions and outcomes and reality that we weren't expecting and we hadn't planned for and were not equipped for. So I think
really too late.
Well,
right?
Well, I think the thing that I come back to within my training, again and again from both sides, it being about context and intent. So if you have developed a trusting relationship with somebody, if you're seeing them day in and day out, if you are in that place and you don't share something that is very meaningful and significant, then you can't be surprised when that is detrimental to that relationship. I think that people who see me once or twice, those consultants in A&E, those people in the locums, in like kind of the doctors who see us once in an appointment and not going to see them again, are more likely to go, yeah, well, that's that, and that's gonna be terrible for you, never mind, here you go, there's a prescription, off you trot. Yeah, lovely. And are quite happy might not be the word, but are more likely to give the perceived bad news. The people who we see week in and week out, who we build up relationships with, who we know that we're going to be in our lives for years to come, are more hesitant to have those hard conversations. And I understand why, because they're hard conversations and you don't want to ruin relationships. But actually, that vulnerability, that clash of humanity rather than schedules and appointments and roles and tasks, is where things get real. And it is so much nicer for somebody that you have trusted to sit with you and say, you know, from the stuff that I've read and from previous people, this is what I'm thinking. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm not casting your child into being the same as everybody else, but I just want you to know that this is what I'm thinking, and we're working on this and this because this is what we're hoping for and this is what we're working towards, and I want to be pointing to the positive, but I don't feel right knowing this without you also knowing this, because if I have, that is my alarm telling me to do my son's meds. So I'll turn that off because somebody else is going to do that. So I think the issue comes back to sharing where we're really at. And if I guess it feels like if that person is withholding information and not really being real and true, then you start questioning how much of what I think is a professional relationship actually real and true. Like, do you really like me, or are you just putting on this role because you're my son's physiotherapist? Like, how much of
stuff, then maybe you're holding that too.
Exactly. Is this just all a game or a job? And that's tricky when, as a parent, you are so vulnerable and so dependent on other people. So I think actually the people who I would love to be able to have more of those difficult conversations are those people who are in people's lives for longer.
And you've
developed those.
And
knowing that you can weather the storm, because it will be like, it's going to be hard. Like, that doesn't make it a nicer. The news is still the news. It's still not going to necessarily land somewhere that's uncomfortable, but you are suddenly in that place with somebody who isn't shooing you out the door after 15 minutes, but is going to come back next week and be like, how are you after that conversation? That was really tricky.
How do you have more questions now that you've thought about it for a week? Yeah. I think when I was doing more direct care, in people's homes, doing the direct physical therapy, I thought about that a lot. I knew that I came with all sorts of information. And as I got to know a family and a child, I knew stuff. I had some very educated guesses about what the future, how things might roll out. And I always wanted to make sure I came at it from a strong relationship. So it was definitely harder if I didn't have a strong relationship. Because then who am I? Who am I in this family's life to come and give them some bad news or whatever? And I also felt really strongly, and this is something I tried to teach other providers and like when I had students and things, like, I'm the physio, right? If I'm not going to talk about this, who is? Like, there's not someone else who's in the house who knows this information about these stairs up to the bedroom, right? Like, we need to start talking, and it's expensive to change the bedroom. So I have to start now. I can't worry. I mean, I can worry, but I can't not bring it up because I think the family can't handle it, or is going to kick me out, or what, I don't, that this is going to take years for them to change the way this house is. And they don't even know that they have to do it right now. How can they even start planning if they don't even know, right? So I felt a lot like this is my job. I think this is why the 24-hour postural care speaks to me so much. Like, I have to tell people about this. They don't know. I barely knew a couple of years ago, right? Like, I am in a role that allows me to have these conversations. They're not easy, but if we can't not, like, you can't not ever, and like you said, if you wait too long, Oh, well,
I'd be like,
I mean,
why didn't you tell me 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
Like, I just redecorated
I
that
just
staircase.
redecorated
Why did you?
the stairs.
I just put a brand new wardrobe in that bedroom upstairs that's not going to fit downstairs.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I do think that's interesting. But again, I think you're right. It takes relationship building and trust to be able to be someone who can say that. The other thing that I think about with this, one thing that in my career that came about, which I didn't have when I first started, was the gross motor classification system.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you know what it is, but it's a way to classify gross motor abilities in children primarily with cerebral palsy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a scale from 1 to 5, and there is some predictive value to it, that there has been longitudinal studies that if you are at one level when you're about 2, then you are likely going to stay at that level. Things will change for you. You'll grow and change, but the description of those levels stays. I wish I had that when I was a new therapist. I mean, that is a concrete black and white way to say, I've got some evidence and here's what I know about this diagnosis. That helped me a lot. It just felt like it gave me a little more. It's not just me saying, I've seen a lot of kids like this and here's what I think, right? Here's what I think is going to happen, right? But
it's bigger than that. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think there's something about when you are talking about hard things. I talk about this in the training and stuff. When you talk about hard things, it is easier when you start talking about bones and muscles and bodies and not about Jimmy or, Penelope or whatever. Like when you're not talking, when we can take out some of the emotional baggage that comes in and say, so when somebody's trunk is really hypotonic, is really floppy and sloppy, then they're going to need support in this way. And that support is something that they need not just when they're in their chair, but then when they're in their bed, or when they're, the whole way through the day and night, in the same way that gravity, funnily enough, doesn't take a hiatus between the hours of 10 o'clock at night and 9 o'clock in the morning. Neither does your child's patterns or whatever else. So, and I've done a couple of animations talking about, things, because I think it's YouTube, and you can watch it and then you can, come across with questions or whatever, but it just takes a little bit of the emotions of it, so that then the connection you have, the practitioner, can be with, when you're talking about your child, it can be about the specifics rather than this general whatever. Let's have this general stuff evidenced and talked about in more maybe more black and white concrete type terms, although let's be honest, nothing's a given, no matter, like medicine is still half made up. We don't actually know, but let's keep the connection authentic, and let's keep the relationship intact, and I think it is possible to think about our language and our communication in a way that we can have a difficult relationship and still have the opportunity to say hard things if we can only do our best. Some people are still unreasonable, actually, just because I have a child with a disability, and just because you're a clinical therapist, does not mean that we've both had a personality transplant and suddenly we're going to get on beautifully, and we are both, I'm like a saint, obviously, and you're obviously, you're Flo, the Florence Nightingale, the angelic kind of
fix it all.
Exactly. You're gonna wasp in there. Wasp, I don't know what that is. It's like a whisk and a something else. I don't know what you were doing.
Whisking.
But yeah, you're gonna swoop in and make it all fantastic, really. But no, we're still just people.
Because you're the saint, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
While I fix everything.
Yeah. Yeah, you fix it all, and I'll just diligently, quietly martyr my own life for the sake of my children, because that's what mothers do.
That is what mothers do. All right, we are going to run out of time. I can't believe it. And I would love, you have given some good advice about practitioner providers and families working together. I love the idea of working from starting with like bones more generally and or specific to bones and muscles. And this is what we know about this kind of diagnosis. And then how does that impact, when we're talking about Jimmy, what does that mean? What other advice do you have for practitioners and families to work together better?
Okay, so whistle stop, because we have just rambled on endlessly. So whistle stop to providers. I think I would try to come back to, you're a very small part of a very big picture. There is a lot of life going on that you don't see. There is a lot of emotion going on that you I will not bear witness to, but don't ever assume that the one thing you've asked them to do is the most important thing you've asked them to do. So there is always more going on than you can think and that you can see. And I guess back to sort of Maya Angelou and what she says around how you make someone feel last longer than the words that you say. The details of your conversations will get lost with time, but the way in which you communicate with people and how they are left feeling that they've been heard, that they have connected with you, that you're on their side, that you're cheering them on, that you're passionate about their child, the essence of those things will supersede any of the other jargon that you end up throwing in their way. And I think if we can step past our professionalism into that humanity, that's where great things happen. When we are two people who are being human and real, that's when we get beyond our skills, and that's where the magic happens, where we can actually create something that is profound and really changes people's lives from both sides of the sort of relationship. From a family point of view, okay, this is the advice I continue to give myself. Please don't think I am just as lost as the next parent. I'm just as trying hard as the next parent. These are not things I have sussed, but I would say step into your own story, not the one you expected. It's important to grieve and recognize and put framing around what you thought life was going to look like and actually what it is, because it's only when we step into our own story that we can really move on. That's a Brené Brown. I don't pretend that I made that.
Oh, you could have though.
I could have wanged that one. I could have pretended. No. Find your people, whether that's in person, online. I'm very diligent and careful about making sure that I have people within and beyond the disability world. That's really important for me. Ask for help.
It's a tough one for a lot of people. Yes,
it is, but that comes from some weird fallacy that when you talked about joy earlier, we have this weird gauge that joy comes from independence. We have this weird, and maybe that's where the steps in the words come from too. We have this weird idea that joy and power and success comes from doing things on your own and without any help from anybody else. And it is nonsense. See what I did there?
Good job.
Nonsense. Nonsense. Because this is our one and only precious life, and so it's my children's one and only precious life, and it's my one and only precious life. So I am going to ask for help because I think that makes their life better. I think it makes my life better, and I also want all of my children, not just my child with really complex needs. I've got 2 other boys as well. I want them to see that when they're grown-ups, they deserve a life that is full of fun and joy and work and, play and all those other things. And so if I want that for them, I need to mirror that in my own life.
I love that.
Martyring myself for my children is not something I want them to do. So it's not something I'm going to model. I want them to think being a grown-up isn't hallmarked by martyrdom, but rather generosity for each other and for myself. So
I love that
for help
so much.
The University of Vermont Center on Disability and Community Inclusion. We support, we teach, we study, we share, we connect. Find out more at go.uvm.edu/CDCI.